Hello and welcome to the Hoop Collective podcast. We talk about the NBA, which we are doing on Tuesday evening, except for Tim Bontemps, where it is already, I believe, Wednesday morning because he is joining us from Lisbon, Portugal. Mr. Bontemps.
Incorrect. It's Tuesday evening, 11:17 at the moment.
Oh, it's still Tuesday evening in Lisbon, Portugal. Now, Bontemps is in Portugal.
We had an incorrect timing situation. So,
Bontemps is in Portugal. Will he be at this live show in Las Vegas on Saturday night?
I guess we'll all find out.
Unbelievably, well, I guess we'll find out. All right, I kind of just tipped it. Joining us from Dallas, Texas, is Ben MacMahon.
Howdy, partners. I've suggested that he do it via Zoom, and we can call him Lisbon Temps, but I don't think he was too keen on that idea.
That was a rare, half decent idea from Tim MacMahon. I'll give him full credit on that.
Listen, when it comes to ways to keep you half the globe away, I've got a lot of great ideas.
All right, so we have some significant NBA news, and there's going to be some more. And I think we're going to get a fairly newsy second week here, so we'll see. And by the time this pod comes out, but I would say the most interesting thing that's happened so far this week, at least as we're recording this, is the three-way trade between the Heat, Jazz, and LA Clippers, where Norm Powell went to Miami, John Collins to the Clippers, and Kevin Love, a second-round pick. And I don't even remember what the other piece was. And that
Kyle Anderson,
the other guy.
Kyle Anderson, slow-mo. So the Clippers have prioritized clearing cap space for 2027. That's how they set Kawhi Leonard's deal. That's how they have elected to set James Harden's deal. And they just were not interested in extending Norm Powell, at least not at a number he was interested in doing. And so Norm Powell was probably not going to be a Clipper for very long, and so they traded him. Miami was able to essentially really do well in this trade. Slow-mo is a backup. Kevin Love only played 23 games last year, although some of that was to be with his father who was dying. It wasn't all due to injury, but still, Kevin Love was a bit player for them. Kyle Anderson a backup, and they were able to deliver themselves a borderline all-star friend of the pod, Norman Powell. So Bontemps, that was for a team that was in need of a talent influx, and certainly I'm not saying they're ready to win the East, but that was just from their transactional value. That was an excellent move from Pat Riley and the Heat front office, Andy Ellisberg, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, this is a fascinating deal on a lot of levels. I mean, obviously, you just laid out the Miami part, right? They turned a couple spare parts of the second-round pick into Norm Powell, and whether Norm starts or comes off the bench for Miami next year, they just got a lot better adding him to their team. You look at the Jazz, we go back.
Well, we'll go.
I guess about a month ago.
We're going to go.
We're doing this one team at a time. Okay.
We're going to start with the Heat.
Well, for Miami, certainly we have talked a lot about how the Heat are sort of stuck in no man's land, and it's unclear what direction they're going in overall. But they are a team under Pat Riley and Andy Ellisberg and Eric Spoelstra that is always going to try to be competitive day to day. And this is a move that, without sacrificing any long-term assets, allows them to be a lot more competitive this year in what is, as we've talked about many times, a very down and very wide open Eastern Conference. And, you can make an argument adding a guy like Norm essentially for free that Miami could be a team that is a top 4 team maybe in the East at the end of the day, or at least has a chance to be. And before this trade, you wouldn't have said that. So I think this trade's a clear win for everybody involved, but that's why I think it's a clear win for Miami.
So MacMahon, if you look at Jimmy Butler, he was making $50 million. They have essentially broken that $50 million into Andrew Wiggins, who they acquired as part of the Jimmy Butler trade, Norm Powell, and Davion Mitchell, who they picked up kind of in an ancillary part of that Jimmy Butler trade, and they've re-signed. He finished the season really well for them. They re-signed. Obviously, that's not going to lead any NBA Today broadcast, but they have pieced it together a little bit. And, considering that there's not a clarity after like number 3 or 4 in the East, I suppose that there's something to be said for piecing those 3 guys together out of the Butler trade.
Yeah, and Norman Powell obviously gives him a lot more juice offensively. You said he was a borderline all-star, didn't make it last year. His chances of being an all-star certainly increased by moving to the Eastern Conference.
That's
Competition's not quite as tough. Now, we'll see how much of his success last season with the Clippers was influenced by playing with a table-setting point guard like James Harden has really become at this stage of his career. But this is a no-brainer for the Heat. Like Bontemps said, they gave up, a backup and kind of an end of the a bench veteran, a guy who's had a great career, but Kevin Love's an end of the bench veteran. They weren't even the ones who threw in the second-round pick. So it's a no-brainer talent acquisition move for the Heat. I think probably the team that's most interesting in this deal is the Clippers, though.
Yeah, so the Clippers, they needed a frontline power forward. It's hard to expect Kawhi Leonard to play huge minutes there. They had Batum, who they did bring back. They talked him out of retirement. Batum's been talked out of retirement for like 3 straight years now. How many more years is he going to get talked out of retirement?
So every year you can make $5 or $6 million.
That's a good place to start. So they obviously had Batum there, but I don't know if you want Kawhi playing huge minutes there. So now they have a frontline power forward. They add Brook Lopez, so they've really bulked up their size. Look, Collins is a player who is limited. He has been limited throughout his career, but he's also got some positives. Otherwise, there wouldn't be teams who would want him and pay him what he's making. But the Hawks struggled to trade him for a while. The Jazz struggled to trade him for a while. There's a reason. He's got limited value. Sure. The interesting thing is they've opened up this hole at shooting guard because Norm Powell was a really important piece for the Clippers last year. He played a very important role, especially scoring, especially while Kawhi was out. And so there's been this, maybe not assumption, but belief that could be Bradley Beal's landing spot, who is potentially on the verge of getting bought out from the Suns. It's been on the verge for quite some time. We'll see. Maybe by the time this pod is out, it'll be there. But, Bradley Beal at $50 million is underachieving. Bradley Beal at $4 million, which would be the minimum, or maybe they can give him the biannual. I'm not sure. Whatever it is, all of a sudden there's a whole different value proposition. But I'm sure there's going to be other people bidding for Bradley Beal. That said, if Bradley Beal had a starting level role sitting there with the Clippers to go to, that would be compelling. And one wonders if the Clippers if they are not uncertain about Bradley Beal's intentions by making this trade, Bontemps.
Yeah, from the moment this trade happened, the only logical thing you could look at was that Bradley Beal would wind up with the Clippers with John Collins, and they would get markedly better as a result because the Clippers are trying to compete next year. And while John Collins and Norman Powell are similar players, I think, in value, which is why they ended up getting swapped for each other, they aren't similar players in terms of fit. And when you look at this Clippers roster, they right now basically only have James Harden who can do anything with the ball. So Bradley Beal would obviously slot right in there, play a huge role for them. And I think the reason we've been waiting to see where Bradley Beal will go and when this buyout process will start is because there hasn't been any clarity on where he'll land. And I think that's been part of what the holdup has been. And ironically, one of the other places that has been rumored as a place for him to land was Miami. And with Miami getting Norman Powell in this deal, on top of the fact that the Clippers open up this spot at shooting guard, you certainly wouldn't think Miami's an option for Brad Beal anymore either. So all that points to the Clippers winding up with Beal, who I think is a similar player to Norman Powell, and John Collins in the same deal. Pretty good return for that.
Well, it's a great situation for Beal. He's going to have to give back about $14 million on the buyout to make the math work for the Suns. He won't make that up in year one, but I assume it'd probably be like a 1+1, 2-year deal with a player option, that sort of a thing. Have a chance to more than make it up next year and to be put into a situation where he's got a starting role on a competitive team, a team that certainly expects to be back in the playoffs. I think there's some family ties for him in LA. Certainly a lot of NBA players enjoy Los Angeles. And, if he's moving his family, that I'm sure there'd be some appeal there. And then John Collins to me is really interesting. I'm not sure that he starts. To me, it makes a lot of sense to have him paired with Brook Lopez as often as possible. Lopez obviously is not a role man. He's a guy who at this point in his career, he spends a lot of his offensive possessions spaced about 27 feet from the hoop. John Collins is still one hell of a lob catcher. And, the problem with John Collins in Utah was he was too damn productive last season. I don't even remember all the injuries they came up with to make sure he didn't play. But seriously, they limited him to 40 games last year. He played less than half the schedule. He played in 70+% of their wins. They won. They didn't win a lot, but they won too often with John Collins in the lineup, and he was a reason. Like they had to get rid of him. They couldn't have him on the roster. They might win too much with him.
They got fined for protocols. I can't remember. Was he the reason they got fined,
Everybody
or was that
the
something
reason.
else?
Right. Come on, dude. They had him. They had Sexton. They had
Clarkson.
Markkanen.
Comments. Yeah, it goes back to Austin Aegis, the comments a month ago when he got hired, when he said we're not going to manipulate lineups anymore. And people took that as they were going to try to win. What it really was they're not going to stop sitting. They're going to stop sitting guys and just not playing guys who are on the roster. They're going to play young guys and see how it goes. And we've seen over the last month, they moved on from Kyle Sexton, they moved on from Jordan Clarkson, now they moved on from John Collins. It's very clear what the motive is.
Okay, so that brings the question:
guys minutes to play.
Are they going to move on from Lauri Markkanen?
That's the question that you're hearing a lot of. I would say I don't think it will be immediately, because I don't think that, just logically selling low on Markkanen doesn't make much sense. I think if they're going to trade Lauri Markkanen, they need him in the lineup and they need him playing well. They need him, showcasing that he's a 7-footer who can do a lot of things in terms of scoring the ball. Last year was a bad year for him. It was obviously a wonky year and in and out of the lineup with all that stuff going on. But I think they can have Lauri Markkanen in the lineup, and they're still going to be the 15th best team in the Western Conference this year.
He also has 4 years and $196 million left on his deal.
Yeah, I think he's got to rebuild his value a bit to get to the place where they would like to turn him into asset-wise.
Yeah, at the end of the day, the Jazz have to meet the salary floor.
Sure.
And they have a $27 million trade exception that they're using basically to stay above the salary cap that was created in this. They could use it for a number of different things as the season goes along. They could still use it in free agency if they wanted. But I will say that, while I agree with you that I don't think Markkanen is getting traded in the next few weeks, I know that this is not necessarily what he signed up for. So keep an eye on Markkanen.
I hear you, but did Markkanen think they were going to be good soon? No, I agree with you on the keep your eye on him, though. But I'm not going to sit here and play violin.
I don't think
for
that's what he thought they were going to do. I think that's a fair
made sure
now,
he
may not be able to do
team.
anything about it.
He also made sure he was going to be on the team all last season, too. So,
I think remember he timed it to where he had
willingly signed up for this thing.
Yeah, he had a 1-year no trade clause. But yeah, hey, Lauri Markkanen, I think, might have the most games played of anybody now without a playoff appearances in terms of active players. If not, he's right up there. And I think you look at they're very early in a rebuild, and again, they need Ace Bailey to pop because there's none of these other guys have flashed star potential. We'll see if a Cody Williams or one of these other guys might, but they haven't to this point. And they dumped all their vets. They dumped Clarkson. They dumped Sexton. They dumped John Collins, and they for a net of no picks. They attached a pick to Sexton, which I'm confused still. And then they got a pick back for Collins, and then Clarkson was just a buyout. But they cleared it out to where they will be, if it was a 24 and under league, I think I don't know, because their summer league team's not even that good. I was going to say I think they'd be
the
real
Thunder
tough.
might win that one. The
Good point. Probably by a lot.
the Jazz still have Yusef Nurkic on their books. Who knows for how long? I would be quite surprised if he finishes the season there. So, all right.
And I
we'll
don't
see.
anticipate Kevin Love will. I don't think Kevin Love will spend a whole lot of time in Salt Lake City.
I would agree. So Jalen Williams put up a 20-minute video on his YouTube channel, which is not that active. I don't think he'd put anything up since the All-Star break. And so I feel like by the time this pod comes out, it'll have more traction. But he basically goes through an explanation of what he went through with that torn ligament in his wrist during the end of the season. He suffered the injury on April 9th, right before the end of the season, when he dove for a loose ball and got tangled up with Devin Booker. And he said he felt like something tear. He could almost hear the tear. And he'd had a sprained ligament in his wrist for a while, and then it tore. And so it was a little bit known that he was dealing with a wrist injury because he would be icing his wrist sometimes during timeouts. But there's a lot of players dealing with injuries during the playoffs, and he was playing every game. And look, he was a little up and down, but it's the playoffs. It's his first deep run into the playoffs. Like, you're expecting guys to be up and down. Like, he definitely got some criticism for his struggles, but the story he told was fascinating about what he went through to stay on the court was pretty remarkable. He said that he was getting shots, pain-killing shots. He said lidocaine shots in his wrist that would, dull the pain before every single game, and including before some practices, because he wanted it to, even to be able to practice it. And he said that he had 28 or 29 pain-killing shots that he took throughout the 4 playoff rounds. And he talked about how some games, depending on how things would go, that the shots would wear off, and he would deal with, basically problems in the fourth quarters of the games because he was having difficulty with it. He talked about how he could barely sleep because his hand would really swell up and be very painful after the games when the shots wore off. He still shot the ball pretty good. His 3-point shooting was the thing that suffered the most. He only shot 30% in the postseason after shooting, I think, let's see, we shot in the regular season. He shot 37% in the regular season. And some of these quotes were pretty good. Let me get some of these here. So he said, my main hand, his shooting hand, it was on his right hand, was just not the same. My jump shots just felt different. He said, I didn't want to tell the world I was hurt. And so the world just ganged up on me about how I wasn't ready for the moment. I'm not sure that the world ganged up on him, but I can certainly see when you're getting criticized, it feels like the world's ganging up on you, which is obviously wrong now. But that was the most annoying thing, because human nature is you just want to scream that you're hurt. But I was able to lock in and use that and not use that as an excuse. And of course, he had several spectacular clutch games. Like MacMahon, he had the 40-point game in Game 6. Game 5, which was basically the turning point game where the Thunder got leverage for down the stretch. He had the 34-point
in the finals.
He had the 34-point game in the Minnesota series in Minnesota in Game 4, where again that series was essentially clinched. They went up 3-1.
Bounced back from a loss with that what was then a career high. But look, he was criticized in the second round, and the context there was that last year in the second round he came up short against the Mavericks, and he sat in that all summer long. And the big question we talked about in the pod: did the Thunder have that second score? And they didn't last year. He wasn't up for that challenge while also taking the second toughest defensive assignment. And then in the second round, he had the worst 3-game shooting stretch of his career. He was 10 of 43, I believe it was, including 3 of 16 in their Game 6 loss. And the people covering the team, we knew there was something going on with the wrist. we didn't know the severity, obviously. We didn't know that there was torn ligaments. It was going to be a surgery right after the season. But you could see in his he wears a big shooting sleeve on that wrist, so you couldn't see the tape job during the game. But when we went through his pregame, I mean, that thing was like heavily taped from wrist all the way basically up to the elbow, the kinetic tape. And he was asked about it after that 3 of 16 and completely downplayed it. Said, hey, something along the lines of everybody's banged up at this time of year. That's not the reason why I'm making or missing shots. But here this guy is playing for a team that, has championship expectations. I mean, best record in the league, best point differential in NBA history. And he's having to figure out not just how to manage the pain, but how to remake his jumper on the fly so he can be that number 2 guy on a team that's trying to win a championship. And never bitching, never moaning, never whining or complaining, never leaking just how severely it was hurt. It's pretty remarkable stuff for a guy who, like you said, the 2 biggest pressure games of the conference finals and then again in the finals, this guy had the best playoff performances of his career.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few people who had their stock raised in the playoffs more than Jalen Williams, both with the way he played in the conference finals and the moments he had to help get over the hump in that Denver series, and now with the way this has come out after. I mean, I was completely enraptured watching this 15-minute video of him talking about all this stuff. It was pretty remarkable to hear him go through it in the detail that he did. You never hear guys talk about stuff like this. And it both shows you the lengths that guys are going to stay on the court in a run like this. I mean, he's talking about having a callus on his wrist from the amount of times he's getting shot up. Like Brian said, it's 28 or 29 times, he said. And you look at the way he played, the way he carried himself, the way he delivered for the Thunder down the stretch. I mean, the combination of him and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Chet Holmgren, we've talked about it a ton all season long, but those guys together going forward are as good as it gets. And if you're the Thunder, you have to be just thrilled to have that trio together. And he answered every question and then some in this run. And, imagine how good he's going to look next year if he's actually healthy in the playoffs instead of dealing with a wrist injury like this after he had a 40-piece in the finals and did all the stuff he did down the stretch with all this stuff he had going on physically.
As Bontemps was saying, he was talking about how the hardest thing for him mentally and physically was that Denver series. He said that's where it was giving him the most problems. By the time they got to the finals, they had figured out a tape job that was a little bit more useful, as you were talking about, MacMahon. But he just said he had to basically, and I don't love this terminology, but he said he basically had to man through it in that Denver series. And he also kept banging it. I think he had an issue where he got it hit by Aaron Gordon. He was like, listen, he goes, it's absolutely killing me out there. And I am guarding Aaron Gordon and at times having to deal with Nikola Jokić. And he's like, it was a really hard thing. So yeah, that stretch of games.
And then he gets to deal with Julius Randle, and then the treat after that's Pascal Siakam. I mean, come on.
Right. So he said the Denver series was the hardest one that he had to go through, and that was where he's having the most issues with it. And, after the series was over, when Sam Presti did his end of season media, he spoke, very glowingly about Jalen not ever using that as an excuse. And he didn't. That's absolutely true. And so I really appreciated him. Obviously some players are always going to be a little bit careful, but I think the fact that he was willing to be so honest with this enriches the story. I really liked it. So I'm sure that's going to get more attention in the next few days.
Sure. I'd encourage anybody to go watch it who's a basketball fan. I mean, it was, like I said, it was fascinating to hear him go through all this stuff in detail the way he did. It was just never hear guys talk about stuff like this. It was really, really fascinating.
Speaking of Jokić, the Denver Post first reported, and then our own Young Masuk confirmed it and followed up, that Nikola Jokić and his representatives have informed the Nuggets that he will not be accepting the contract extension that was offered this summer. This is not a stunner because even Josh Kroenke, their governor, said in his season-ending media that he was going to offer it and he wasn't sure that it was actually going to be accepted. He has 3 years left on his contract, but he has an option for the last year. So he's got 2 years left guaranteed with the Nuggets. And he could have done a 2-year extension, basically. There would have been a 3-year extension. He'd opted out and replaced it. But basically, it would have been only 2 years of new money. Next year, he can sign for a much larger deal with 3 years of new money. So it's actually kind of 4 years when you look at he'd get paid for this year and then add 3 more. So it kind of made sense that he would not sign this. And, like Josh Kroenke said, the team was prepared for it. That said, MacMahon, when your franchise player doesn't sign an extension, it is going to stutter you a little bit, especially when the team has had, some fumbles the last couple of years with the roster.
Yeah, and again, not a surprise. It completely makes sense from a financial perspective for Joker to go ahead and wait. Just like it made sense from a financial perspective for De'Aaron Fox to go ahead and wait and not to commit to the Sacramento Kings last summer. Now, we all know how that worked out. Having said that, Joker's got a little bit more playoff equity, championship equity in Denver, I would say, having won a title as opposed to never having won a playoff series like De'Aaron Fox did in Sacramento. And I do think that the Nuggets have done a really good job, despite what Bontemps might want to complain about, improving the supporting cast around Joker. And, hey, Denver is the team that pushed the Thunder to 7 games this year. I think the Thunder win regardless, but Aaron Gordon playing on a ripped hamstring certainly didn't help Denver's cause in Game 7. Went out and improved the bench depth from there. So I don't see this as some kind of danger sign for the Nuggets. But you're always more comfortable when you've got your guy locked up as long-term as possible.
Well, what it is going to do is put a whole big spotlight on Denver next season. And, the Nuggets are going to have to show that the moves that they made actually did improve the roster and actually do give them a better chance of going deep in the playoffs. Because look, for everything that we have said here about, and you guys are correct in that it didn't, it certainly makes sense why Jokić didn't extend, and it would make sense, and Josh Kroenke himself brought up the fact that he might not. It still doesn't change the fact that he didn't. And for a team that has come under fire, I think fairly for some of the moves they have made in recent memory, it is going to, I think, put a further magnifying glass on this upcoming season. And if they do lose in the first round or lose in the second round again, and Jonas Valanciunas isn't playable in the playoffs, and Bruce Brown doesn't replicate what he did a couple of years ago, and Tim Hardaway isn't that effective, or the young guys don't step forward or whatever, there are going to become natural questions going into next summer about, all right, well, is Nikola Jokić going to extend now? And if he doesn't, what's Denver going to do? Like, that's going to be hanging over him now.
What about Luka Doncic extending now? He doesn't have much incentive financially either.
Well, I think what would make sense there is to do the short-term extension to get him to 10 years when he's renegotiating the next one, and then, get you to a higher level financially. But hey, I don't know. I don't know where Luka stands right now in terms of what's been going on with the Lakers. I do know that he's a guy.
One thing I'll say about Luka, there is something to be said for signaling to especially the new ownership group that I want to be your partner. And there are worse, Bontemps doesn't like that. There are worse brands to commit to and worse ownership groups to commit to than the Lakers and Mark Walter. So what Luka could do, even though there may not be a financial benefit for him connecting right now, there is something to be said for saying to the new ownership, let's get into business together and let's begin a process of doing this together. There is a value to that, because if the Lakers know that Luka is invested, even if it is for a short deal, MacMahon, they can make some decisions that are a certain way. And I do think there's a value to that, that at least has to be considered. So like De'Aaron Fox, when De'Aaron Fox didn't extend, it was a message that he wasn't necessarily firmly committed to the partnership. Even if Luka can leave his options open, there's something to be said for saying that you're committed to the partnership.
And again, I do think that shorter term extension makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. Financially, it puts him in the best possible position. And let's just be honest, the Lakers aren't a bad franchise to bet on, especially now that they have the deepest pockets of any ownership group in the NBA. They've got a lot of work
It's not
to do.
deeper than Ballmer, but
okay, well, sure. Okay,
much deeper pockets than they had.
Extraordinarily deep pockets, and the best brand in the NBA, in terms of marketing and all those kind of things. And we'll see how the DeAndre Ayton thing works out. But I believe Luka was on board with that. Obviously, same representation, same draft class, all those sort of things. The LeBron stuff, not ideal. And that is a guy that Luka grew up. He was his favorite player growing up. And just quite frankly, like the way the Dorian Finney-Smith thing went down, not ideal. It's one of Luka's all-time favorite teammates. And, the contracts came out, and I get the Lakers prioritizing cap space in the summer of 27. Wendy, did you see, is there any guaranteed money in Dorian Finney-Smith's contract after 26, 27?
There is not. It's just a 2-year guarantee.
Huh. Well, I found that to be interesting. I don't think it was I don't think that Dorian Finney-Smith left real thrilled with how the Lakers front office handled that whole situation, which isn't ideal. Not ideal at all.
All right. Well, Bontemps wants to say something before you get to Dorian Finney-Smith.
This entire conversation insane. I don't understand why it's up to Luka Doncic to just bow down to the Lakers to say, hey, we should have a partnership here going forward. To me, the Lakers have to show Luka Doncic they deserve to have a partnership with him. I mean, this is a team that is a mess at the moment. And I mean, the Dorian Finney-Smith thing does not look great for them. And they do not have a lot of talent on the roster. And this is not a team that Luka Doncic has any sort of loyalty to. They traded for him out of the blue 5 months ago, and now he's there. And I don't see why. To me, if I'm Luka Doncic and I'm his representation, to me, I'm keeping all my options open till next summer. It doesn't do him any good to sign an extension now and take options off the table next summer. To me, it doesn't do any good to take any pressure off the Lakers to try to improve. Luka Doncic isn't, to me, in a position where he should be cool with them having some 2 or 3 year rebuilding plan. The Lakers could hardly put contending teams around Anthony Davis and LeBron James. They've made 1 conference finals in the last 5 years. This is not a team to me that deserves some sort of long runway for, oh, hey, trust us to some sort 3 years of your career into our hands, and we're going to build a good team around you. If I'm Luka, I'm saying, I'm Bill Duffy and his representation. I'm saying, all right, guys, let's see what you're going to do. You're going to wait 2 years to sign players. Is that the plan? You're going to wait till next summer to sign players? Okay, let's see. There's going to be a lot of cap space next summer. There's a lot of options next summer. I just think that to me, this is a one-way transaction if Luka signs this extension, where Luka's doing the Lakers a gigantic favor. He's not doing any favors for himself. Whereas to me,
here's what
I'm putting all the pressure on the Lakers to try to continue to do smart things to build this team around him, as opposed to putting blind faith in them to do so for the next 3 years of his career.
He was in the eye of the storm in terms of being the focal point of the most controversial trade in NBA history, having his life uprooted. There was all kinds of stuff swirling around him after that. If he doesn't extend, what's the primary focal point of the Lakers' day-to-day coverage going to be? It would be like KD in his last year in OKC or his last year in Golden State? Do you want to deal with that black cloud covering and those constant questions day after day after day after day, knowing the season is going to be a complete circus? And if he does a short-term extension, he still has leverage, because we all understand if he demanded a trade next off season, he would have power because he wouldn't be locked up long-term. He wouldn't be locked into a 4-year deal like Dame Lillard was when he finally tried to get his way, or did successfully got his way out, just not where he wanted to go from Portland. So that's why I think the short-term deal is, I don't anticipate Luka will call and ask for my advice. It hasn't happened yet, but if he does, that's what I'd tell him.
In a vacuum, I understand what you're saying, Bontemps, and if that's the route that he goes, it is certainly defensible. Because of the change in ownership, I think there is a window for him to say, let's get into business together.
Is Mark Walter the governor of the team?
I understand that Jeannie Buss is the
Mark
governor
Walter
of the team.
the governor of the team? Is there a new general manager of the team?
Well, these are the conversations where Luka would be able to have the conversation and find that out. And if he didn't like what he heard on that, then that would be a different story.
Well,
but
I'm just
I
saying,
think you're getting into business. You're getting into business
very,
with Mark Walter, is what you're doing.
What I would say,
I think Luka Doncic can get into business with whoever he wants, and I would keep all of my options open as long as possible. And then, if I want to sign a 2-year extension next summer, I can still do that. Like that's all.
Well,
I
think
would say.
Luka.
I just don't.
I think one of the things, without speaking for him, I think he has learned what ownership means and how ownership can be a big factor in the NBA.
And he's learned, he's learned how when the ownership loves you, life's great. And when things change, you lose leverage. But let's just use Luka's own words. June 19th, right after the sale, his tweet: "The Lakers are an amazing organization. I'm looking forward to meeting Mark and excited about the future. I am also grateful to Jeannie and the Buss family for welcoming me to LA, and I'm happy that Jeannie will continue to be involved. I look forward to working with both of them to win championships," with an exclamation point. Now, I anticipate that Laura Beth Sager, Luka's business manager, probably pinned those words, but Luka certainly approved them before they went out on his social media. So that's the last thing we heard. And again, I think if you're looking forward to working with him, but you'd like to maintain leverage, flexibility, and maximize your financial position, the short-term extension makes sense.
I'll say his actions over words, and we'll find out on August 2nd.
I love it. We will see. Probably.
Although, you know what? I don't rule out this thing not being settled until after Eurobasket.
Of
I'm
course.
just telling you the whole reason it's an August 2nd.
That's fine. Sure.
I just wanted to let people know who.
It's a good point. That's a good point.
The whole reason it's August 2nd and not like July 2nd is because it has to be timed to when the contract was signed. And the reason it was signed August 2nd is because his deal with the Mavericks was, hey, I'm going to go play for Slovenia. This is the year when they qualified for the Olympics and then, made the run in the Olympics. And we'll take care of business after the Olympics. And so I wouldn't be surprised at all if he told the Lakers, hey, Eurobasket's coming, and I'm going to play in Eurobasket for my national team, and we'll take care of this after that.
Which, by the way, Eurobasket starts.
Rick St. Jean, Lakers assistant, is working with the Slovenian national team this summer also. Just a sign of the partnership between Luka and the Lakers too.
Yeah. And by the way, the Eurobasket goes from August 27th through September 14th, but there's exhibitions leading up to it. So he certainly could do his business if he wanted to before that, but it wouldn't be out of the realm of understanding that he would do it after. So we may not get but he will, in theory, do interviews between there. He doesn't have to, I guess. It's not the NBA.
What he did last time was said, I'm focused on my national team. I'm not talking about the Mavericks or the NBA.
And by the way, that would be understandable. Brad Stevens gave a press conference on Tuesday talking about the Celtics and their situation. And look, he said what you have to say, which is that the reason that they had to make these trades, to take their team down was the second apron. They knew this was coming to a certain extent. He said rather definitively, we will not use the term rebuild. However, they do need to rebuild. Now, they don't need to rebuild their core players. They have 3 core players that they're keeping, and Jason Tatum hopefully will make it back and everything like that. But they do need to rebuild their role players. And whether that's...
Okay, a rebuild is like ground up, not with 2 supermax guys and one
I
of the best
want to play
role players.
semantics however we want to do it. It's not. It's
we call it a
they need.
retool.
They're going to need to get some more players. Bottom line.
Correct. Correct. They have to rework the roster. I mean, look, they moved on Kristaps Porzingis for George Niang, essentially. They moved on for Juhadi for Anthony Simons, who I think is a stopgap option, and I could see them potentially move on for him if they could save some more money on his
Well, they're
expiring
trying.
deal.
I mean, they are like I have talked to other teams who have said the Celtics are actively trying to trade Anthony Simons. Like whether they can or not is neither.
It would behoove the Celtics for a variety of reasons to get out of the luxury tax this season, to reset their repeater mover, and to look. I think we're going to get into Al Horford in a minute. Luke Cornett was introduced, I believe, Tuesday in San Antonio with his new team, the Spurs. He is no longer with the Celtics.
You see why he said he took number 7? Because he hopes to be 1/3. He said because he hopes to be 1/3 the player that Tim Duncan was.
Tim Duncan.
I could see Luke. I could actually see Luke saying that. It's pretty funny. But no, look, and as Brad also said, Al Horford very unlikely to return to Boston. This is also not a surprise based off where the Celtics are at. Again, go back to the Jason Tatum injury. The Jason Tatum injury set off a whole cascading series of events across the league, let alone in Boston. And if Jason Tatum is healthy and the Celtics are trying to win the East next year, Al Horford is not going anywhere. But with the Celtics very clearly in a rebuild, retool, reset, whatever you want to call the 2025-26 season, what it is not is a season where they're trying to win the Eastern Conference. And if you're Al Horford, who's approaching his 40th birthday, who has, at most a couple of years left probably in the league, even though it looks like he could play another 10, he wants to be competitive. And so he, to me, is the number 1 free agent available in terms of guys that can really move the needle in terms of the championship picture next year.
Well, the unrestricted guys, there's some good restricted players, but he is,
in terms of guys who are moving the needle for next season to change the championship picture, Al Horford is the best player available, period. And
I think you could ask Steve Kerr
is going to make them better.
You could say, Steve Kerr, hey, who would you rather have in your roster next year, Al Horford or Jonathan Kuminga? And tell me what Steve Kerr tells you. Ask him over a
he would answer that one very diplomatically, is what he would do.
Ask him over a survey.
Well, he might have both. He would say, you'd probably say, I'd like to have both, which he might have.
He would probably say he'd like to have both. And Al Horford would have a really good home if he lands in Golden State. But look, wherever Al winds up, it's going to be on a team that's got a shot to win. And he's going to have a big impact, especially if he can be in a situation like he was in Boston, where he can play 50 to 60 games and be fully ready to go in the playoffs. Because I thought the Celtics managed in the last couple of years perfectly and had him ready to go when it mattered. And when he ramped it up against big opponents or in the playoffs, he still could have a massive impact, even though he's approaching his 40th birthday.
Yeah, and
by the way,
Celtics,
speaking of Porzingis, Ansi Sala, the general manager of the Hawks, spoke today, and he said they have no concern about Kristaps Porzingis' health. So thought I'd put that out there as well.
And the Celtics lost their number 1, 2, and 3 center
in Eurobasket.
Yeah, but the Celtics, their 4th-string center is penciled in as their starter now, but it's not like a major concern going into the season because it's a gap year for them. And maybe a Luka Garza or help me out with it,
Josh Minot.
And no, he's not a big Keita.
He's talking about Nidas Keita, who is Portuguese, actually, where I'm at the moment, or Portugal.
Yeah, maybe
my guess is he'll be starting. And he's a super interesting player. I mean, he's a 7-footer who can really jump. He can move his feet. Like he's an interesting developmental guy that was on a 2-way in the past. Boston converted him And I think he's going to get a lot of minutes next year. He's going to get a chance to develop. He could be a really good long-term piece for them. But that's what next season is going to be about. It's going to be about, you just said, Brian, can Josh Myden turn into a piece for them? Can Luke Garza be a piece for them maybe? Can they find some other guys? Can Hugo Gonzalez, the guy they drafted from Real Madrid, play for them? That's what 25,
and look, here's the thing.
about, not winning games in the East.
If it's going to be a gap year, make it a gap year. So this is what I'm saying. People may say, well, why would the Celtics try to retrade Anthony Simons? The guy's an electric scorer. They need something like that. The answer is not because they don't like him. The answer is because they're trying to make it a true gap year. Get out of the tax, reset the repeater, reset the luxury tax, put themselves in a position to truly
Dallas
recover.
Mavericks and jump up in the lottery and get Aaron Peterson or Nate Amen or AJ DeBansa or Cameron Boozer or whoever in next year's
Although it's a hell of a lot easier to land in the lottery in the West than it is the East.
That's true. The Jazz are going to make that clear. As a reminder, there are still some tickets left. By the way, I was told it's close to a sellout. And I wouldn't just say that to try to get people to buy tickets. I was close to a sellout. So whatever that's worth to you. It's a Saturday night at the Brad Garrett Comedy Club at the MGM Grand. MacMahon and I will be there. Will Bontemps make it from Portugal?
God, I hope not.
Will he literally fly back and forth across the Atlantic just to do this podcast? Because I believe he's supposed to be in Portugal for multiple weeks.
Ooh.
Guess we'll find out.
That is correct.
How committed is Bontemps?
We will find out.
Yeah.
we will find out.
HoopCollectiveLive.com. All right. Thank you to MacMahon. Thank you to Bontemps. Thank you to Rafa, our favorite Mexican, who is producing today. Thank you for watching and listening.
Hold on a second. The IT department.
Oh, because you're married?
Mexican. My God. I'm sorry, Rafa. You were nowhere near my favorite.
I wouldn't. I was going to say the podcast, but you wouldn't be on the air half the time if it wasn't for your favorite Mexican. All right. Thank you for listening and watching the Hoop Collective. We'll see you soon.
Adios, amigos.